Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Thomas Hayes always believed life was made up of clear choices. Either you were loyal, or you weren't. Either you honored a commitment, or you simply admitted you weren't ready for it. There was no middle ground in his mind. So when he decided to marry Isabel, he did so with the certainty that he was doing the right thing. She seemed to be everything he was looking for: intelligent, dedicated, with clear goals and a presence that filled any room. They met at a corporate event where he was providing IT services to a medical clinic, and she worked as an executive assistant. Their conversation flowed naturally, and within a few months they were already living together. Less than a year later, they got married in a simple but meaningful ceremony with only close friends and family. Thomas was a specialist in hospital systems, a job that demanded attention to detail and a constant ability to spot flaws before they turned into problems. He applied that same logic to his personal life. He observed, mentally logged patterns, and when something deviated from the norm, he didn't ignore it. In the first few years of marriage, everything seemed to work well. Isabel was affectionate and attentive, and they shared dreams of building something solid together. But slowly, small changes began to appear. Changes that, on their own, might have seemed insignificant, but to someone like Thomas, painted a troubling picture. Isabel started frequently mentioning meetings that ran late, mandatory training sessions offered by the clinic, and last-minute commitments that kept her from getting home at her usual time. At first, Thomas didn't question it. After all, she'd always been dedicated to her job, and he respected that. But the frequency increased. Her messages during the day dwindled. Her replies grew shorter, more automatic. And something that used to be natural between them, the simple "I'm home" when walking through the door, became rare. Thomas also noticed that Isabel started putting more effort into her appearance. Not that she'd ever been careless before, but now there was a different kind of care. More elaborate makeup, new perfumes, clothes she'd never worn to work. When he commented on it, she'd brush it off, saying she just felt good and wanted to take better care of herself. He accepted her explanations, but deep down, something didn't add up. Her phone, which used to be left lying around anywhere, was now always nearby, face down, and she checked notifications with a frequency that bordered on nervousness. One night, while they were having dinner, Thomas mentioned that a coworker had told him about a tracking app he'd installed in his wife's car to ensure her safety during long drives. Isabel reacted oddly. She tensed up, asked if he thought that was necessary, if it wasn't an invasion of privacy. Thomas replied that he thought it was a good idea, especially since she'd been coming home late so often. Isabel said she didn't see the need, but Thomas insisted, arguing it was just about safety. Reluctantly, she agreed, but the conversation left an unease in the air that he didn't ignore. In the weeks that followed, Isabel's overtime became even more frequent. Thomas started mentally noting the times, the excuses, the days of the week. There was a pattern. Every Tuesday and Thursday, she'd call saying she'd be staying late. Always with the same justification: reports, training, last-minute meetings. And always with the same slightly rushed tone, as if she wanted to end the call as quickly as possible. It was on a Tuesday night, around 8 o'clock, that everything changed. Thomas was at home, reviewing lines of code for a system he needed to update, when his phone rang. It was Isabel. She said, in a calm, almost mechanical voice, "Hey, love. Don't wait up for me. I'll be staying late to finish some important reports. I'll probably get home around 11. Thomas replied calmly, told her it was fine, to be careful. He hung up and just sat there, staring at his phone screen. Something inside him wouldn't accept that call. It wasn't anger or desperation. It was just a mental click, like when he spotted a flaw in a system. He grabbed his laptop, opened the car tracking app, and waited for it to load. When the location appeared, he sat motionless for a few seconds, just processing the information. Isabel's car wasn't at the clinic. It was parked in front of a motel on the outskirts of Nashville, about 20 minutes from home. A discreet place, off the beaten path, frequented by people who didn't want to be seen. Thomas took a deep breath. There was no hesitation. He grabbed his car keys, put on a jacket, and left. During the drive, his mind worked in silence, reviewing every detail from the past few months. The messages she quickly deleted, the calls she took in another room, the weekends when she claimed to be too exhausted for anything. It all made sense now. And it hurt, but in a different way. It wasn't the pain of shock, but the pain of confirming something he'd already known deep down. He arrived at the motel in less than 20 minutes. The place was exactly as he'd expected, simple, discreet, with parking in the back. He quickly spotted Isabel's car, and next to it, another vehicle he recognized immediately. It was a gray sedan, recent model, with a clinic decal on the rear windshield. Thomas knew whose car that was. Dr. Adrian Cross. A married cardiologist, father of 3, known for his frequent social media posts celebrating his perfect family. Thomas parked a few yards ahead, turned off the engine, and sat there for a moment, just watching. There was no rush. No desperation. Just a cold, calculated clarity. He got out of the car, walked to the front desk, and went inside. The clerk, a middle-aged man who looked bored, glanced at him with little interest. Thomas approached, said he was looking for his wife, that she'd mentioned staying there because of a problem at home. The clerk hesitated, but Thomas insisted, showing him a photo of Isabel on his phone. The man relaxed, confirmed she was in room 16, upstairs. Thomas thanked him and walked up the stairs quietly. The hallway was narrow, dimly lit, smelling of mildew mixed with cheap cleaning products. He walked to room 16 and stopped. He didn't hear voices, just the muffled sound of a TV playing. He took a deep breath, raised his hand, and knocked on the door. 3 firm, spaced-out knocks, deliberate. There was silence from the other side. Then the sound of quick footsteps, someone whispering something unintelligible. The door opened slowly, just a crack, and Isabel appeared. When her eyes met Thomas's, she froze. All the color drained from her face in seconds. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Thomas didn't say anything. He simply pushed the door open calmly and stepped inside. Inside the room, sitting on the edge of the bed, was Adrian Cross. He wore a slightly unbuttoned dress shirt, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He tried to stand quickly, as if that could somehow fix the situation, but Thomas raised his hand, gesturing for him to stay put. The silence that settled was heavy, suffocating. Isabel tried to speak, stammering something about it not being what it looked like, but Thomas cut her off with a look. He then turned to Adrian and, in a calm, almost casual voice, said, "Dr. Cross. What a surprise to find you here. I thought you'd be at home, enjoying your Tuesday with the family. Isn't that what you posted this morning? Something about quality time with the people you love?" Adrian swallowed hard, tried to say something, but the words died before they left his mouth. Thomas continued, without raising his voice, "Pretty intimate reports, huh? I guess the clinic approves of this teamwork method." Isabel tried to step closer, reaching out toward him, but Thomas took a step back. "Don't even try, Isabel. I didn't come here to hear excuses. I came because I needed to see it with my own eyes. To confirm what I already knew. And now that I have, there's nothing left to say." Adrian tried to intervene, saying it was a misunderstanding, that they were just talking, that nothing had happened. Thomas laughed, but it wasn't a joyful laugh. It was dry, bitter, full of contempt. "Talking?" Thomas repeated, glancing around the room. "At a motel? At 8 at night? With the door locked and the lights off? Dr. Cross, you might fool your patients with that family man act, but it doesn't work on me. I work with systems. I spot flaws. And you, doctor, are a walking flaw. Adrian tried to compose himself, said Thomas was overreacting, that there was no need to turn this into a scandal. Thomas turned to him, eyes locked, and replied with cutting calmness, "Scandal? This isn't even close to one yet. But it will be." Isabel started crying, saying they could talk, that she could explain, that it wasn't what he thought. Thomas slowly shook his head, like someone watching a child try to justify an obvious lie. "Isabel, you called me half an hour ago saying you were working. I opened the car tracker and came straight here. No explanation changes that. No excuse fixes it." He looked at both of them, shifting his gaze between Isabel and Adrian, and continued, "You two made a choice. And now you'll live with the consequences." Thomas turned around and walked out of the room, leaving the door open behind him. Isabel ran to the doorway, calling after him, but he didn't look back. He walked down the stairs with the same calmness he'd used to climb them, crossed the lobby, and returned to his car. Once inside, he rested his hands on the steering wheel and took a deep breath. There were no tears. No shouting. Just a strange mix of emptiness and clarity, as if a fog he hadn't even realized was there had finally lifted. Thomas drove home in silence. When he arrived, he locked the door, went straight to the guest room, and lay down without taking off his clothes. He stared at the ceiling for hours, mentally replaying every detail of the scene he'd just witnessed. The panic in Isabel's eyes. Adrian's pathetic attempt to justify himself. The empty words she'd used to downplay what was undeniable. It was all etched into his mind, but not like an open wound. More like a scar that was already beginning to form. The next morning, Thomas woke up early. He hadn't slept well, but he was functional. He made a strong cup of coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and opened his laptop. He started doing research. Lawyers who specialized in divorce. Separation procedures in Tennessee. Marital rights. Asset division. He wasn't the kind of man to act impulsively when it came to important decisions. He preferred to plan, organize, and make sure every step was taken as efficiently as possible. And that's exactly what he did. Around 10 that morning, Isabel came home. She walked in with swollen eyes and a pale face, as if she hadn't slept. Thomas was sitting in the living room, his laptop open on the coffee table. She stopped at the doorway, hesitant, as if unsure whether to enter or wait for permission. Thomas didn't look at her. He just kept typing. Isabel slowly approached, stopped a few feet away, and said in a hoarse voice, "Thomas, we need to talk." He stopped typing, calmly closed the laptop, and finally looked at her. "Talk about what, Isabel? About how you lied to me for months? About how you were meeting Dr. Cross while I was here believing every word you said? About how you destroyed everything we built together?" Isabel started crying, tried to move closer, but Thomas raised his hand, gesturing for her to stop. "No. You're not going to come here pretending you're sorry now. You made choices, Isabel. And I'll make mine too." She tried to argue, saying it was a mistake, that she'd been confused, that Adrian had taken advantage of the situation, that she still loved Thomas and wanted to fix things. Thomas listened to it all in silence, without interrupting. When she finished, he took a deep breath and replied with a calmness that bordered on discomfort, "Isabel, you can tell me anything right now. You can invent 1,000 excuses, 1,000 justifications. But none of that changes the fact that you betrayed me. And it wasn't a slip-up. It was a conscious, repeated, calculated choice. You called me last night saying you were working, knowing exactly where you were and who you were with. That's not confusion. That's disrespect." Isabel tried to grab his hand, but Thomas pulled away. "I've already called a lawyer. The divorce process starts this week. You can stay here until you find another place, but we won't be sharing the same space anymore. I'll sleep in the guest room. And from now on, any communication between us will go through our lawyers." Isabel dropped to her knees, begging him to reconsider, saying they could go to therapy, that she was willing to change, that she'd do anything to win back his trust. Thomas slowly shook his head, picked up his laptop, and stood up. "Isabel, trust isn't something you win back. Trust is something you build from the beginning, and destroy in seconds. And you destroyed ours in a cheap motel room." He walked toward the guest room, stopped at the door, and looked at her one last time that morning. "You made your choice. Now live with it." And he closed the door behind him, leaving Isabel alone in the living room, surrounded by the weight of her own decisions. In the days that followed, Thomas dove into the separation process with the same precision he applied to his work. He gathered documents, organized bank statements, listed all their shared assets. The house was in both their names, but he'd paid most of the down payment with money he'd saved before the marriage. His lawyer assured him that would be taken into account. There were no children, which simplified things legally, but didn't make the pain any less. Isabel tried, in those first few days, to start conversations. She'd make breakfast, leave notes around the house, look for openings to talk to him. Thomas ignored it all. He only responded when absolutely necessary, always in a straightforward way, never allowing any intimacy to creep back in. She quickly realized there was no room left for reconciliation. His decision was final. What Isabel didn't know was that Thomas hadn't stopped there. He was too meticulous to leave things half-finished. He knew Adrian Cross couldn't just go on with his life as if nothing had happened. One of the nights he couldn't sleep, Thomas started researching the medical board at the clinic where Adrian worked. He discovered there was a strict code of ethics, especially regarding inappropriate relationships between doctors and staff. Isabel wasn't directly under Adrian's supervision, but they worked at the same institution, and their relationship could be classified as misconduct. Thomas gathered everything he had, photos of Adrian's car at the motel, tracking records from Isabel's car showing multiple visits to the same location, messages she'd left open on their shared computer before everything came to light. He compiled it all into a detailed report, but without any personal identifiers, and anonymously sent it to the clinic's Human Resources Department. It wasn't revenge in the traditional sense. It was simply making sure the rules were applied fairly. 2 weeks later, Adrian was called into a meeting with the board. The internal investigation started discreetly, but soon other employees began talking. Apparently, Adrian had a history of inappropriate behavior with other staff members, but nothing had ever been formally reported, until now. With the anonymous report acting as a catalyst, the situation escalated quickly. Adrian tried to deny it, but the evidence was too solid. He was temporarily suspended while the investigation continued. Adrian's wife, Claire, found out everything through a colleague at the clinic who decided to tell her the truth. Claire was a lawyer, and she didn't waste any time. She hired one of the best divorce firms in the city and filed immediately. Unlike Isabel, Claire didn't cry or beg. She simply acted, and acted with surgical precision. She froze their joint accounts, filed for child support for their 3 kids, and made sure everyone in their social circle knew exactly what had happened. Adrian, who'd always cultivated the image of the family doctor, saw his reputation crumble within weeks. Isabel, meanwhile, also faced consequences at work. Though she wasn't formally fired, the atmosphere became unbearable. Her co-workers looked at her differently. Conversations stopped when she entered a room. There was a silent, but palpable, judgment. 3 months after the scandal broke, she resigned. She said it was to pursue new challenges, but everyone knew the truth. She was running away. Thomas and Isabel's divorce was finalized in less than 6 months. With no children and a relatively straightforward asset division, the process moved quickly. Thomas kept the house after reimbursing Isabel's share, which she used to rent a small apartment on the other side of town. They didn't speak during the hearings. Everything was handled through their lawyers. When the judge granted the divorce, Thomas felt a weight lift from his shoulders. It wasn't complete relief, but it was an important step. Adrian lost his position at the clinic after the investigation concluded. The board decided that, although there hadn't been a direct violation of hierarchy, his behavior was incompatible with the institution's values. He was transferred to an administrative role at another branch, with a reduced salary and no direct patient contact. His separation from Claire was devastating. She gained primary custody of the children, and Adrian was ordered to pay significant child support. His carefully built public image was ruined. Thomas, meanwhile, began rebuilding his life. He sold the house a few months after the divorce. He didn't want to live there anymore, surrounded by memories of something that no longer existed. He bought a smaller but more modern apartment in a different Nashville neighborhood. He focused on work, took on bigger projects, and started going to a nearby gym. He wasn't looking for anything, he was just trying to fill the emptiness with routine and purpose. Months passed, and Thomas stuck to his routine. Work was going well, and he started volunteering, helping small clinics implement more efficient security systems. It was a way to use his skills for something meaningful, something with purpose beyond profit. He met new people, formed friendships untainted by the past. And slowly, he began to feel whole again. Adrian, on the other hand, never fully recovered. His separation from Claire was brutal, and he lost far more than he'd expected. His older children knew about the affair and struggled to look at him the same way. He tried to rebuild his image, but in a city like Nashville, where everyone knows everyone, it was impossible to escape his tarnished reputation. He eventually moved to another city, trying to start over far from judgmental eyes and whispered comments. Isabel also tried to start over. She got a job at a small accounting firm, far from the healthcare field. It wasn't what she'd dreamed of, but it was what was available. She lived alone in a modest apartment and spent weekends in silence, often mentally replaying the choices that had brought her there. She tried a few relationships, but none lasted. There was something broken inside her that she couldn't fix, a deep inability to truly trust herself, let alone anyone else. One ordinary night, Thomas was sitting on his apartment balcony, sipping tea and looking at the city lights. He thought about everything that had happened, about how his life had completely changed in just a few months. And he realized something important: he no longer felt anger. He no longer felt pain. What he felt was gratitude. Gratitude for having discovered the truth when he did. Gratitude for having had the strength to act quickly and decisively. Gratitude for not letting the situation drag on for years, slowly eroding his dignity. He understood that the betrayal, as painful as it had been, had set him free. Free from a relationship built on shaky ground. Free from someone who didn't value what he offered. And, most importantly, it had taught him the importance of trusting his instincts, of not ignoring the signs, of acting when something was wrong instead of waiting for things to fix themselves. The lesson Thomas carried with him was clear: trust is the foundation of any relationship. And when that foundation is broken, no amount of excuses, tears, or promises can rebuild it. Some things, once destroyed, simply can't return to what they were. And that's okay. Because sometimes, the end of something bad is the beginning of something better. Thomas closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and smiled. It wasn't a smile of full happiness, but of peace, of someone who'd weathered the storm and come out the other side not just intact, but stronger. And in the end, that was all that mattered. He'd made his choice. And now he was living with it, the best way he could. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.